Um, so hello to everyone and welcome to our program with Ambassador Shinsuke Sugiyama. My name is Paul Pass and I'm the Executive Director of the Japan-American Society of Dallas-Fort Worth, which is co-presenting this event with the World Affairs Council of Dallas-Fort Worth. We're excited to share that we have had over 145 people register for this event from 16 states and 2 countries. Special thanks to the Embassy of Japan, the staff at the Embassy of Japan, and to the new Honorary Consul of Japan in Dallas, Sam Shichijo. I would now like to introduce a friend to the Japan-American Society, Jim Falk, who will serve as this evening's moderator. Jim is the president and CEO of the World Affairs Council of Dallas-Fort Worth, where he has led the organization's transformation to become one of the best World Affairs Councils in the country. He has interviewed countless diplomats and global leaders, and he is the co-host of the weekly McQuestion program on KERA here in Dallas-Fort Worth. Please welcome Jim Falk.
Thank you so much, Paul, and it's great to be with you. And looking at your slides, you're just doing a terrific job. And World Affairs Council is always pleased to collaborate with you. It is such a pleasure for me to have the opportunity to introduce the Honorable Hideo Fukushima. He's been the Consul General of Japan in Houston since 2018, and its jurisdiction includes Texas and Oklahoma. And as you know, Paul, he's almost a resident of Dallas. He was coming here so often before the COVID-19 pandemic, and we all look forward to when he'll be able to come back and forth. His last post was at the Embassy of Japan in Bangkok, where he served as Minister, Deputy Chief of Mission, and Permanent Representative to the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. His past roles have been in climate change and public diplomacy, and he's had assignments across the world, including Washington, Rome, and Moscow. It's great to have him with us tonight to introduce His Excellency. Welcome, Consul General Fukushima.
Well, thank you, Mr. Fogg, for your very, very generous introduction. It's a very honor to be here. And certainly that I miss visiting, being in Dallas after a while. But under the circumstances, it's kind of difficult. But well, modern technology unites us like this, so it's good to get together like this virtually. Today, it is a great honor for me to be able to introduce Ambassador Sugiyama, my big boss from Washington, D.C. He has had a distinguished diplomatic career within Japanese Foreign Ministry, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We call it MOFA. That spans over 40 years. He most recently served as MOFA's Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs. Previous positions include Deputy Director General of the Middle Eastern and African Affairs Bureau, Deputy Director General of the International Cooperation Bureau, Director General for Global Issues, including a role as Ambassador for Climate Change, and Director General of the Asian and Oceania Affairs Bureau. Ambassador Sugiyama has also held leadership positions within the Foreign Policy Bureau and the Treaties Bureau of MOFA, and is an expert on international law. Thank you so much for joining today's event, Ambassador Sugiyama. The floor is yours.
That I would like to express my deep appreciation, feeling honored to be introduced by Consul General Fukushima in such a nice way. Good afternoon or good evening to you all. I am delighted to be with you all here tonight. And thank you for attending this forum virtually while we continue to live under the tyranny of COVID-19. I would like to thank Paul Pass for organizing this event, Jim Falk for moderating it, and Consul General Fukushima for introducing me, as I said at the outset. I'm told that Texas has lost about 20,000 of its citizens to the virus. In 2011, the Great Tohoku earthquake and tsunami hit Japan, killing a similar number of people at that time. So I would say that I would be able to understand the sorrow. I want you to know that we Japanese face this difficult time with you as your best friend. And I would like to express my deepest condolences to those who lost their lives and their families. Before the pandemic, I had visited Texas twice. In April 2018, right after I became ambassador here, I went to Fredericksburg to the National Museum of the Pacific War. I did attend a ceremony at Japanese Peace Garden, which was a gift from Japan in 1976. It is so healing to have a Japanese Peace Garden at the Museum on the Pacific War in the northernmost place in Texas, beautiful state. On another trip, naturally I visited Houston and Dallas, including the Toyota headquarters and Daikin, Texas Technologies Park. I was truly impressed by the energy of the Texas economy, its business environment, and its workforce. My travels through Texas and 35 other states made me much more aware that America is truly the United States of America and that Japan must strengthen its ties with each state. As a matter of fact, this is something which I've been instructed by the former Prime Minister as well as the current Prime Minister when he was the Chief Cabinet Secretary before I was about to depart to come here as their envoy, that I'm told that Mr. Sugiyama, this is after all, as I said repeatedly, the United States of America. So you have to deal with the quite a number of important persons inside the belt of Washington, D.C., but that's not all presenting the United States of America. So I have sought not only to strengthen, as I said, ties to Washington inside belt people, which is really, really normal job of an ambassador and an envoy, but also to strengthen ties to the states and to local Japan-American societies around the country. All of which explains why I'm happy to be here today. The role of the individual states particularly struck me, of course, as I watched the recent presidential election and learned more about the electoral system. And I imagine I'll get a question or two about the election this night. But let me say something in general about the results. Prime Minister Abe and President Trump had a very good and friendly personal relation as an official relationship. I attended numerous meetings between the two of them as leaders, and I saw the relationship up close. I'm sure Prime Minister Suga, who became the Prime Minister just a couple of months ago, and President-elect Biden will have a similar, very good personal as well as official relationship. In fact, Prime Minister Suga has already called by telephone call President-elect Biden to convey his congratulations. They agreed on further strengthening the alliance and cooperation on international challenges such as tackling this COVID-19 crisis. They also agreed that they will meet at the earliest possible time, presumably if not that much early time face-to-face, but at least a virtual meeting, but we'll have to see. It may sound like a diplomatic nicety to reaffirm the alliance, but there's a substance behind such affirmations. So much depends upon our alliance. Peace and stability, of course, but also the economic prosperity of our two nations, the number one and the number three economies in the world. Foreign direct investment by Japanese companies in the US was nearly $620 billion as of last year. It is in that sense that Japan has already surpassed the United Kingdom as the largest inventor in the United States of America. As I told the group recently, Japan believes in the United States and its future, virus or no virus. Japanese companies have created 948,000 direct jobs as 2018. So we are well on our way to directly employing 1 million Americans, which contributes to local economies and governments. In October of last year, our two nations signed the Japan-US Trade Agreement and then Japan-US Digital Trade Agreement. Ambassador Bob Lighthizer, as United States Trade Representative, and I, as an envoy representing my country and my government, signed the agreements at the White House in front of the President Donald Trump. As I was sitting there in the Roosevelt room of the White House, I couldn't help but think how much things had changed from some more than 30 years ago when I was a young diplomat at the embassy in Washington. I don't mean much how much things had changed for me personally, but now much things had changed between Japan and the United States in trade, in particular, in economics, in security, in level of trust, and in understanding between our two countries as a whole. Do you know what my job was back then as a first secretary young diplomat in the embassy? I was in charge of foreign trade negotiations, a lot of trade negotiations. Talk about a stressful job, and indeed that was really, really stressful and difficult. Japan-US economic relations have totally been transformed since those days. Today, Japanese companies are not outsiders to America. They are integral part of local communities and the US economy. And let me say a few words about Texas in particular. Texas is becoming an increasingly important partner for Japan as Texas economies grow. Japanese real asset balance in Texas amounts to 35 billion US dollars, and we have created 75,000 jobs in Texas in 2018. But last count I saw, 436 Japanese companies have offices or factories in this beautiful state of Texas. Many major Japanese companies are moving their headquarters to the Lone Star State. Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, North America, Daikin Huge Factory, and headquarters in the Houston area. Toyota, Kubota, Tractors have relocated their North American headquarters near Dallas. NEC and 7-Eleven have their headquarters in Dallas. At my first meeting with Governor Abbott, when I visited this beautiful state for the second time, we agreed to strengthen the partnership between Japan and Texas. And I know the governor is serious about this because he made an official visit to Japan last fall. I have no doubt Japan and Texas will become even closer in the years ahead. Now, lastly, Beyond our alliance and our economic partnership, I would like to emphasize another crucial pillar of Japan-US relationships, which is grassroots exchange. This could be a whole speech by itself. So just let me say, I know the society has worked hard and creatively to foster exchange programs during the pandemic when so many things have been on hold or in limbo. And I would like to express my sincere gratitude to you all for your dedication to our ties of friendship and understanding. In a previous video, I congratulated the Japan American Society of Dallas-Fort Worth on its 50th anniversary. But let me again recognize your contributions to Japan-US relations for half a century. And let me again thank you for all you continue to do to help Japan and the United States enjoy the warmest of relationships. Thank you for your attention, and thank you very much indeed for tonight.
Thank you, Your Excellency. And let me just remind our viewers to go ahead and send in your questions, and we'll get to just as many of them that we can. Sir, I'm so glad you brought up trade. And of course, you can never have a conversation about Japan and the United States without talking about trade. Earlier this week, there was the announcement of a new global trade agreement, the RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. And that news was obviously almost overshadowed by the presidential election here and the COVID pandemic. But tell us more about how you view that, and what does it mean that the United States is not a signatory?
Actually, this is something that I've been deeply involved personally, because that was the time when I was, as Consul General Fukushima first introduced my bio, what we call Vice Foreign Minister, which is the top of the bureaucracy, who is supposed to talk to my Foreign Minister, Chief Cabinet Secretary, now current Prime Minister, then the Prime Minister, Mr. Shinzo Abe. And then that was the time when we are faced with the whole division about the pros and cons about TPP 12. And then that was the time when we are yet to conclude Japan-US trade deal. And here came the current president who outwardly said that he didn't have any intention to join TPP 12. So I think as a chief of the bureaucracy of the Foreign Office, try to talk to relevant leaders that maybe we would like to fly TPP 11 with the US. And then try to go into, in parallel to Europeans, to form Japan-EU free trade agreement. And then we should be able to think about how we're going to deal with this president who is so expressed clearly that he has no intention to get back to TPP 12. Eventually, we turn ahead to go to bilateral, which I mentioned at my initial speech. Then came this RCEP. Now, RCEP is a kind of free trade agreement among originally 16 states. To start with ASEAN 10, and then Japan, Korea, China, and then Australia, New Zealand, plus India. That made 16. It is slightly unfortunate that when we were able to come up with the signature of the single text some couple of days ago or something, India was not able to take part in that signed document. But rest, 15, ASEAN 10 plus other 5, including China, were able to sign the document to go through the necessary kind of, approval procedures in accordance with each legal requirements in each country. This is from the scratch something which I myself and my leaders really envisioned. First TPP 11 and then Japan EU to be followed by some kind of bilateral trade agreement, which we did, and then to be followed by RCEP with, unfortunately, without India. But these are the certain sequences of things which have happened. So we flew the Japan, US, TPP 11 to be followed by at least trade in goods agreement and then digital to begin with as a bilateral kind of trade agreement with the United States of America, and then being followed by these 15 countries kind of, Asia Pacific region free trade agreement. So by that, I think we seem to involve quite a number of percentage of the entire trade in the world. Japan, US, and then Japan, EU, and then Japan with other 14 countries, including China, and then ASEAN 10, Republic of Korea, Australia, and New Zealand. By that, we have been able to be in a position to talk about the same kind of trade laws, same kind of trade obligations and rights in terms of goods to open up in such a way that we agreed to talk about intellectual property rights in such a way that we are supposed to. So by these, I think we seem to have been able to enter a new expanded free trade world. Although this RCEP is something which only has been signed, so we should wait until some time to make it get into force. But I'm sure sooner than later, we will be able to put that agreement into force.
Let me ask you this though, sir. Do you see an avenue for the United States to either come into the revised TPP or this agreement?
Well, what we have been doing, as I said repeatedly, that we already have done bilateral trade with US in goods and e-commerce. And then RCEP doesn't affect in any way. I am not going to get down in details about things, but your say agricultural interested products are totally sort of outside of scope. But at the same time, we are able to be bound by some of the legalities of the trade law by concluding the RCEP. So I think each one of them must have some pass because of a reason. I mean, had your president been able to say to join the TPP 12, we would have been able to establish TPP 12 first, together with the Japan EU. But because of the fact of life that you didn't like that, that is something that we can do in such a way that I have just described.
Let me ask you about something that's taking place now in Japan, and that is the quadrilateral military exercises, the Quad.
Yes. Yes.
And it's very interesting about how India has now become a part of it and the geostrategic impact and vis-a-vis China. So I'd like you to elaborate on this, please.
I don't want to try to take one of the words in a technical way, but our Quad is based upon the notion of the free and open Indo-Pacific Ocean. And by definition, as this catchphrase does show, it is destined to be free and open Indo-Pacific region. We need the freedom of the navigation. We need and everything is being based upon international law, not only UNCLOS, but also every international law. And then what we try to do is to let everybody get inside in that free and open Indo-Pacific region. By definition, as I said, it is set free and open. It is not trying to be exclusive to alienate anybody. And at the same time, we do believe that it is quite important for us Quad to get together further closely, not in terms of the economic and trade relations, but in terms of the foreign relations and even military joint activities or something. That's what we are doing, which is quite recent. But I do believe that that would be beneficial to secure peace and security in the region.
And I guess we should explain that the Quad is Japan, Australia, United States, and of course, India now.
Right, that's right.
So you said several years ago at a speech at the Asia Society, China is playing a key role vis-a-vis North Korea.
Mm.
Most recently, this year, you said that relations with North Korea can be called the biggest crisis for Japan's security since World War II.
Yes.
While President Trump has had some foreign policy successes,
Right.
I suspect one would say that he's not been that successful with North Korea. What are the best options?
Well, this is one of the most difficult questions to answer in the world. I myself directly and indirectly involved in the question of the North Korea and DPRK's nuke and other destruction of mass destruction of the weapons of mass destruction, as well as for us very important subject matter of the abduction. You know, it dated back to as earlier something in 1994. When you guys are able to form the agreed framework. And then I'm not trying to bog down into detail about these 20 or 30 years of the history in dealing with the DPRK about these issues. You know, one thing that your present decision to make face-to-face meeting would be very much helpful to at least stop the confrontation and the escalation of the crisis. I think it is fact of life that he has been able to stop that. And then that's something that everybody should feel very much appreciative of what his very courageous decision to meet with them and him not only at once. That said, although DPRK leader promised to your president, I think that was in Singapore or somewhere, to denuclearization of the peninsula, but it is very unfortunate that things are not that much being materialized for that direction. But mind you, this is not the first time. We have been betrayed by them at least twice or three times over the past 25 years or so. So what we are now trying to do is to make it effective on at least 3 or 4 Security Council resolutions, economic sanctions, which have been adopted. And now we are now implementing these sanctions. I think the last one was already adopted, I think 2 or 3 years ago or something. It had a kind of grace period. But, you know, by now, these grace periods have been ended. So it is about time for us to see the effect of the economic sanctions. And then we have to make it certain that these certain sanctions are real. There are some ship-to-ship transfers and something to break the sanctions. There are some others, you know, fake monies and transportation and, you know, transfers and something. So when I'm watching closely to be very much in line with what these provisions of the Security Council resolutions have been depicting. So that's what we are now trying to do. And let's see how DPLK is going to react or not react. But they must be abide by their promise to go for denuclearization of the peninsula. And plus, of course, not only nuke, but also other mass destruction weapons. And also for us, it is absolutely important to see the result of the abduction issue.
Well, before we talk about some more geostrategic issues, I'd love to ask you about the Olympics, and you'll be pleased to know that we have several questions about it. How does it look? How will the Olympics look next year? And how confident are you that they'll take place?
Well, I think this is the most timely question because I'm told that that was only a couple of days ago or something when Mr. Bach, the chairman of the International Olympic Committee, visited Japan to be received by my prime minister to discuss how we are going to be able to do that. And then at the meeting, the chairman, my minister, prime minister, expressed Japan's determination to host the Tokyo Olympics and Paralympics next summer as a symbol of overcoming the COVID-19 crisis and showing our country's recovery from the March 11th, a great Tohoku earthquake. The Prime Minister is also considering various options for holding the Olympics and Paralympics with possibly the participation of audiences in mind. They agreed to work closely to ensure safe and secure Olympics and Paralympics. As a matter of fact, as I recall, this Olympics is supposed to get started on the 23rd of July next summer, to be followed by Tokyo Paralympics on August 24th. So it's still some months to go. And then I do feel that I'm hopeful, as well as my prime minister and every leader, and then International Olympic Game Chairman, Mr. Bach, and everybody involved, that we are going to just make it to do that in such a way that's safe and successful Olympic and Paralympics game next summer.
Well, it's such a shame when they were canceled, and your country did such an outstanding job preparing for them, and we're certainly hopeful, and it would be such a delight to be able to sit back next July and watch the Olympics. We have a question from Marvin Singleton, and he said, what is the current thinking of the Japanese government about creating air travel bubbles? He also said that it's his understanding that now flights have been resumed between Japan and Hawaii. Is that accurate?
Actually, you see, I do believe that for any country, this is a very certain difficult question to answer. First, we must address properly and effectively to try to control this international pandemic, the COVID-19 crisis. But at the same time, we try to continue social, economic, investment, and trade, and these sort of activities, all social activities. Sometimes these don't go together easily. One time, some countries, or my country, try to restrict people's activities so that the COVID-19 is going to be overspread in the entire country or entire international community. Some countries have taken a very strict measures to lock down. My country hasn't. My country quite effectively been introduced by our lawmakers to create a new law, which is in the form of the revision of the existing law, but that gave my prime minister and cabinet to have a power to request people to say wear masks or to say having a social distance. We call it 3 non-Cs, but it means social distancing thing, and so on. And then we are being given the power through my central government to each the prefectural governor to even legally request on some of the activities the local people. But fortunately, we haven't taken that the second phase. Although I think we introduced for the first time ever since the end of the last war, my prime minister or former prime minister made a declaration of the emergency as of the 4th of April. And then he was able to get rid of that declaration as of the 25th of May. Your president did that on the 13th of March. Now, it seems to be seeing ups and downs, but currently in everywhere, situation seems to be coming up. They call it the second wave, the third wave, or fifth wave, I don't know, but it's coming in the Japanese society too. But in our society, it's rather fortunate that I think most important figure is the people who have been killed, the number. You know, my country's number is something like 1,900. Your country's number is something like 250 or more thousand. Of course, your population mass is much bigger than the Japanese population mass, but nonetheless, in terms of the relative situation, I think Japanese society seems to be doing slightly better. That's why I think my government started thinking about mitigation of the restrictions, including this trip ban. And then we gradually introduced some of the mitigating procedures. First, business track, and then open up some of the air traffic. Now, I think on the business people are able to come to Japan, of course, on the condition of the RCA test or something like a 14 days self-quarantine period or something, but they can come to Japan to do some business, basically up to 3 months, but to be extendable. So I think, but at the same time, we have to be careful that if you go try to open and mitigate, now the number of these people, at least who have been infected by the virus, is going to be destined to be increasing. That's what you are saying in this country, and that's what you are saying in Europe and elsewhere.
Well, I think people have to be flexible. Sir, we have about 6 more minutes because I know you have a hard stop, and do want to ask 1 or 2 more questions from our audience, if we may. This is from Lauren Ballinger. From your perspective, what are some of the ways that the United States could improve its relationship with Japan and the ASEAN countries? You might give us 2 or 3 points that you think are the most important.
You see, before I came here, I once was Deputy Foreign Minister who was directly in charge of the Japan-ASEAN relation at the time, some 8 years or something, and when the former Prime Minister paid a visit, all ASEAN 10. That was the time ASEAN became unity or union or something. But we have to be mindful that ASEAN is not likely to be only one. ASEAN, as I say, is regarded as something like one by one. Although they form a unity, they form a union, or they form a something get together, which is quite right. But you must be mindful that you ought to know each country one by one. Because there are so much, varieties and differences in terms of the size, difference, mass and populous mass, land mass, history, and then geographical setup. But the common point for us to deal with them is that they are ASEAN, and then they are big in number of populous mass and big in number of trade, and then they are very much important. So we are now trying to even strengthen our relation with ASEAN as a whole, and then each country one by one.
I wanted to ask you about an article and an interview I read in one of your papers, Nikkei, by national security professor Yuichi Hosoya. And he said that Japan must rethink its excessive dependence on U.S. security. And just a few months ago, Japan made a decision, which I think surprised the United States, not to purchase the Aegis Ashore missile. How is Japan now making these decisions? Is it just trying now to build a stronger military industry, or what's the underlying reason that this sale did not go through?
You see, let me try to get back to you, not directly answering this Aegis Assure's thing, which is slightly technical. We revised security treaty, which was done in 1953, in 1960. So this year happens to be the anniversary of 60 years of current U.S. Japan security mechanism and arrangement. There are two salient points in the security arrangement: Article 5 and Article 6. Article 5 does obligate you to defend us if an armed attack against either party, meaning you and us, in the territories under the administration of Japan, would be dangerous to own peace and security, and declares that it means in U.S. Japan, would act to meet the common danger. This is a rather sort of jargon of international law, and particularly a peace treaty, as is the case with NATO, as is the case of U.S. Japan, as is the case of the U.S. Korea. This doesn't mean that you are legally obligated to defend Japan in the territory if the armed attack occurs in the territory under Japan's administration. Article 6 is, on the other hand, Japan should be obligated to give you what we call facilities in area, namely U.S. bases in the soil of Japan, on condition that the agreement is being made through the course of joint committee, and then you have to abide by the SOFA provisions, and then prior consultation mechanism. But basically, for that matter, you are able to make most use of these facilities in areas, namely Japan's, U.S. bases in Japan, not only for the sake of peace and security to defend Japan, but for the sake of the maintenance of peace and security in the Far East, in the region. So these fundamental kind of structures wouldn't change since 1960. Of course, Japanese, the economic power and Japanese positions and Japanese political will is going to be developed. So in each case, we try to do further, and then by new law, we are able to do much, much further to help you defending us, or to help to give you some of the more sort of logistical support on something, and we are able to do more jointly to defend Japan. When it comes to that specific question, it is more technical that because of the safety reason, my government decided not to deploy that particular one, but instead, that doesn't mean to say that we do believe that Japan is safe without any kind of missile defense system. That's what now NSC people are now discussing, and hopefully by the end of this year, ideas are coming up to replace this Aegis Ashore and to be based upon interoperability of whatever the equivalents with the United States of America, because the United States of America is the single ally which is legally obligated to defend Japan.
Thank you, Ambassador. That's such a comprehensive answer. I always like to end on a very happy note. And Alana Tang asked this. She's 21 years old. She's a college student that's had the opportunity to travel to Japan. And she wants to know, what advice do you have for a young American like herself who wants to be personally part of strengthening the ties between our two countries?
Oh, it's You know, I myself have been teaching law at my law school back in my law school in Tokyo. And I've lectured at a great number of universities, Georgetown or Columbia, Harvard, or, you know, whatever. So I've been telling the youngsters for years that you guys are trying to open up eyes in international community. And then in my part of the region, your part of the region, you ought to study hard first your history, your language, your whole certain political theories, as well as my region, language, history, other histories in my region, and then political theories and then the institutions of my country and other Asian countries. But I very much would like to encourage you, and if it is possible for these youngsters, try to study languages, all language, and then if it is possible, try to visit and see things by your own eyes, by your own thinking and feeling, to be mixed with people. If you're interested in Japan, I think the best way to learn Japan is to visit Japan.
Wonderful advice. Your Excellency, thank you so much for joining us. I know you have a very busy schedule and you need to leave now. I want to, on behalf of the Japan America Society and Paul Bass, just wish everyone a very happy and safe Thanksgiving. And thanks so much for being with us this evening. And thank you to Consul General Fukushima. Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Stay safe. Thank you.